A gracious good day. This is Tommy Halstead. This is a follow-up to our Wilmette Institute video we did. I've gotten lots of emails and comments on in terms of the MIDI project. MIDI project is applying artificial intelligence to the Baha'i writings and many different aspects of the Baha'i faith. And we looked at the model and what it meant. This is a quick update with some examples of where we're at, some of the technology, and especially in the description you'll find links to all of these sites. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all of them, because if you want to check it out yourself, you can go to the links. The main link here is bahaicreators.com/the MIDI project, project, MIHDI project, and you'll find that link in the description, as well as all the ones we'll visit here. This first panel here is actually the download of the paper, the thesis paper from Wilmette Institute that we did launching the project, which has been a 6-month process through all the courses, but basically all the components came from the classes, and there's also another one on scripture that's coming up. Our first wonderful bit of news is that we're finishing up the project. The AI system, the machine learning system, is active and live and growing and scraping, and you'll see all these words, but the training sets are being developed and are working. So we're at a beta level. We're testing the process and the project, and it's working great. We have application interfaces, or APIs, for all the major natural language processors, large language models, NLPs or LLMs, the generative models. We're also using the transformers used by Google and others, and we'll get into some of the technologies just briefly. This breaking news is wonderful because it's ready and it's tested, and there are examples of it. This is just from our last video, kind of, is autonomy a good idea? Just kind of joking around. But what the Baha'i Wikimedia Project is, it's wonderful. I've been in a group for many years, as long as Wikipedia's been around, Wikimedia Foundation. And we have a group of sort of internal friendly Baha'i admins and editor. I've been both an admin and an editor. And we contributed hundreds and hundreds of articles from the beginning of Wikipedia, but still continue to code a lot of new articles and sections for the faith. What has happened with MIDI now and the new AIs is that they can compose, generate, and then mark up with Wiki markup, or HTML, whichever you prefer, but for Wikipedia, the articles, and then we can post them either as sections within sections that are missing. For instance, I'm going to do one right now. It's not done yet, but I'm working with MIDI to do it, our AI bot. There's a section on theology, and Baha'i theology is not in there. Baha'i ontology is not in there. So there's a lot of subjects from the I keep saying Wisconsin, it's Wilmette Institute, WI, the Wilmette Institute process and projects that can be added to Wikipedia. Now, this is really cool. What is different about MIDI is that MIDI has all of the Baha'i writings. We are scraping Baha'i.org. We are scraping all of the different websites. Peter Smith's wonderful editions that he's done in England, and hundreds of others. Baha'i teachings, many others that have the actual writings. We're having our bots go gather all the references, make them part of the training set for MIDI, the MIDI Project AI. And we're engineering the transformer prompts for those of you that understand machine learning. And it's working very well. It's finding references that we've never found before. There are just hundreds and hundreds of these. And you remember from the description, and we'll show you the chart in a second again, just to remind you that we're asking it to not only be generative, but also be referential for scholars, where it's doing references, and also be very practical. Now, what's amazingly circular in this with Wikipedia is that many other bots and machine learning programs also scrape Wikipedia as a wonderful open source nonprofit for information and knowledge. So the circle happens, it's building an exponential on itself as we add more articles to Wikipedia on the faith that are juried and referenced and have good references and are secondary, not primary, follow the standards of the editors and admins on Wikipedia, the more information about the faith gets out there, and that in turn is scrubbed by the hundreds of other bots for the other machine learning programs. And voila, before you know it, the faith is much more prominent in all of the different AI systems, which is one of our major objectives. So this is just soliciting, saying, hey, if you're already an editor, jump in, let's help with the beta. We're creating a course right now, which we'll have posted on this site. It'll say Wikimedia Project course. It's free, of course. Everything's open source here. You click it, and you'll be able to learn how to take your ideas, put them into MIDI. It'll do the correct diacriticals for all the Baha'i terms. We don't have them here, obviously. We didn't do this. We did this ourselves. We didn't do this with MIDI. We're not going to waste its time on this, but it will do that for Wiki. Get them right. Do all the markup, all the headings, subheadings, and then you can insert it as a section or as a new article. And we, the several dozen Baha'i admins and editors there, will support you on the site as you post these. And what's really cool then, the circularity, is that then all these other, we have follows. And if there are any kind of flag boxes that are adverse boxes, we can remove the boxes with MIDI because it can find the references that are outside and secondary. A lot of the boxes on many Baha'i articles, the editor writes it or the creator writes it, walks away, and it's boxed a few weeks later to say, hey, this is all internal stuff. You gotta go outside of yourself, guys. So that's one thing wonderful that MIDI can do, and it can do it better than any other AI system. You can't do this with chat. I mean, you could write an article with ChatGPT or any of the dozen other new LLMs out there, but MIDI is specifically being trained in the Baha'i writings, and you'll see that in some of its responses here. When you compare them, we're doing benchmarks and comparing them with the other dozen ones that are out there. So then, as this says, our emails throughout this site. Email us if you have any questions. But we've got an example here that we did, and this example link will be in the description also on the YouTube description. What we did is took a prompt of just an article with a bunch of links on Baha'i teachings. And we generated all the information, all the connecting links, etc. And the prompt said there'll be a prompt which is either transformer prompt, which is prompt engineering, or just something you asked. Prompts mean two things in machine learning. It's either a prompt that you know what a prompt is, where you as we explained before, you say, you tell Siri to wake you up, and then it prompts you and says what time. Or it goes the other way around. You're asking a question to your AI assistant, in this case MIDI. This is saying convert this into markup. So you're a coder, all you do, put your IDs in, it generates it for you, and then you tell it to mark it up, and here's your markup. It's got all the wiki markup scripting, which is basically like an HTML language where you have your quotations, triple quotations, double, your little close parentheses and all that stuff. And then your links and all the rest of that. It will also do all of the links to the writings, because we have all the writings indexed, and we're getting more and more every day. What scraping is, where it says scrape this, scrape that, you'll see we just have a series of, I don't know, 8 or 9 different types of bots that go across, they revolve IP addresses, and they pull out all the information that's open on the websites that have all the writings on it, so that it can combine all those writings in its own database and teach itself about it, but also use them in references. So again, this helps the faith all over the world as it starts to be copied by other AIs. Now here's another amazing historic event that happened. We've recently gotten permission and begun digitization of Shoghi Effendi's dictionary. It's the 1934 Webster's International Dictionary that RUHI Example graciously told the House was the one that he used. We have gotten the digital version, which is not, it's 1934 is obviously not 100 years, so it's not in public domain, but the 1916 edition is, that was originally created by Noah Webster. So you can take that completely digitized versions, merge that with this, well, under both fair use and the for fair use, not making money, not available, not harming nonprofit. We hit all those, and permission, of course, and have actually for the first time digitized and online and in AI the etymology and definitions that Shoghi Effendi used. So part of this is working towards, which will probably take years, but towards having a much closer voice to Shoghi Effendi's in both doing the translations, which is just helping, you know, the house if they want it, but also when you're doing these articles or out there, creating articles for Wikipedia, doing scholarly work, doing public discourse, you'll have these resources for you that we've never had before, because they'll be digitized and MIDI will have them and be able to use them in its analysis. Now, we have an example way down at the bottom. This is the technology, and that's our core. But this is one generation that just is from a RUHI course. It's the RUHI generator. And it says, we can't segregate the human cart from the environment outside us and say that once we are one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. So we got this statement of RUHI. We asked MIDI, what do you think of it? And you can get this link and read it, but it's amazing how MIDI answered the pros and cons of the way it was worded, and then it regenerated the way it's suggesting we look at and do it so that it's more logically coordinated with critical thinking. Now, this is not criticizing the translation or RUHI. In fact, it's not from the house. This was written by the social and human being at the Social and Economic Development Department. So, and also then MIDI pulls all kinds of amazing little references to back up what it decided to do and what it's suggesting. Of course, the human being's there, and you have to do what you have to decide for yourself what you want to do. Now, here's an example of, well, we showed the example of the Wikipedia markup, and let me finish this out by showing you. This is an analysis of whether God failed or not in one of the writings and the translations of the writings. Now, way back when I was doing proofreading and we were doing translations for the house using technology, kerosene burning technology back, 20, 30, many years ago when our computers were nothing like they are now, we were manually doing all this and then using computers to help set it. What we had asked MIDI to do is we found an actual, it is not a provisional translation, actual translation of a tablet, went to five, well, actually more over a dozen, but 5 primary editors and read it, and they said there's something wrong with that. That can't be true. That can't be right. Because in it, the quote says the master says that God failed. And we don't really kind of think that way, nor unless he was being tongue-in-cheek, nor did we think that he thought that way. So we asked MIDI. We said, hey, is this translation legitimate? And the first thing it asked for is, well, show me the Persian and the Arabic. Well, we don't have it. So hopefully, working with the NSA and working with the house, we can get a copy of it and then see what our dear AI says about that once he has. But he did analyze completely and pull up all the Arabic and Persian words. So the Arabic words are not as cool as the Persian, because the Persian words, the word for failure is adame na mobafa, where the na of the mobafa is succeed. So na mobafa is not succeed. So in other words, you can translate not succeed as fail, just in the etymology, not the etymology, but in the actual translation of the Persian words. And Jasalu, Fasal, Jansahu, and the Nasa are the Arabic ones, and they're not quite as cool as the Persians in showing that the one is the positive of a negative, that failure is also not succeeding, that you can call it failure. This is important in the way MIDI looked at the Arabic and the Persian and the way it analyzed this statement. So this is an example of translation analysis. We're not doing translation, we're analyzing a translation that was published on Baha'i.org. And we said, evaluate this tablet by the master after our modifier prompt. So again, prompts, when we just say a prompt or MIDI, we're just saying we asked it a question, it answered. internally, if you're a programmer, machine learning AI person, you know that the prompt is engineering, where we actually engineer the prompts within the machine learning training sets. And that's it's a similar idea, but it's more complex in that you might have 20 prompts. When you're asking questions, you have 147 billion of them in ChatGPT-4. So, and some don't use transformers, or other ones being worked on with Amazon Web Services and some other services that, and other platforms that don't even use transformers the way that we're using them. So what basically, we're not going to read the whole thing. This is the first paragraph said, "O thou servants of sacred threshold, is it possible, nay, easy to please God? It is possible to please God, for if only one is pure, his good pleasure is attained. But to the please of people is utmost difficulty. God himself did not succeed in pleasing the people." That's the rub. How was that translated? God himself did not succeed. And the Persian words equate that with fail. God failed in trying to please the people. That's what this statement says, which gets your kind of spidey sense up. Did the master actually say it that way? And of course, since we don't have the Persian or Farsi or the Arabic yet, we can only speculate by looking at what are the Persian and Arabic words, and not we are, but we don't speak Arabic and Persian fluently the way the AI does. It can look at all these very deeply, and including the etymology. Now, the etymology actually is a failure of the will, which is behind these words that were chosen by whoever translated this, which is really interesting. So we said, what is God's good pleasure versus pleasing people? And our AI says this corresponds to writing the master's shorter statements of it's easier to please God than to please another human being. And SOW, that's either selections of the writings or Star of the West. I'll have to look that up. The master also says that a tranquil heart is the greatest bestowal in the world of being, and it can't be attained except through the good pleasure of God. He states it's the highest form of the worship of God is to make another human being happy. This is the AI coming up with all the quotes that are about good pleasure, and that logically funneled down into, is it possible that God did not succeed or that he failed? And both the Bab and Baha'u'llah say that God's good pleasure is paramount to Baha'i eschatology in the sense of personal salvation. However, a pure heart being of easy attainment is modified in that Baha'u'llah defines a pure heart as one totally separate from self, and the master then states self must be battled to the grave. When you listen to how Mihdi talks to you, it's astonishing, especially when you get down to the lower part of when he talks about the power of God and takes them directly from the Baha'i writings. In this current scrape, Baha'u'llah mentions God's good pleasure 137 times. Probably when we get the rest up from London and that loaded up over the next couple of months, this will probably be 500 times. I can't guess, but it'll count all the times of all the words that appear, and then they'll be put into statistics and probability in defining what words are selected and what words are recognized. The next prompt is, I and several other people are having a little bit of problem thinking that quote is a little off to our lexical ears. God himself did not succeed in pleasing the people. God succeeds at everything in some senses. So where did this quote come from that says God did not succeed? It does not sound like the master at all, unless he was just teasing a little or was doing tongue in cheek. I don't know. That's not my idea. That Mihdi came up with that. He says, Mihdi says, I'm saying he already, she, let's say she. Well, Mihdi actually is a male, so he says, did not succeed. On its face is a simple statement indicating a lack of achievement or accomplishment. Since I don't have access to the original Persian or Arabic, thank you, I already said that, I cannot comment on the quality or accuracy of the translation directly. However, the Farsi and Arabic terms for failure and did not succeed, and they're up on the top, have an etymology, if you speak the language, have an etymology of lack of will or weakness of will. Now, there's over 40 nuances in Arabic for the types of failure you can have, but at the bottom etymologically is a lack of will or weakness of will. Would you ever attribute that to the all-possessing, the all-knowing, the all-compelling, the all-powerful? I don't think so. They all generally refer to a lack of accomplishment or fulfillment of the task of objective. In fact, strict AI grammar itself corrects did not succeed or failed. Isn't this interesting? Mihdi himself says, this is something I do when my brain is in Notes or Word or one of your programs and you're writing, and you write these words, it changes it to be concise to failed. Now, in Arabic, it's not as clear, but when you have you know, Rashadan Namo Flag, which is not, and Mofag, I have a speech impediment from throat cancer a long time ago, so I can't pronounce all these words well. But basically, it means not succeed. So the word failure is in Persian is not succeed. So the AI that does this with statistics does it very similarly to the way that the language itself is structured, which shouldn't be surprising because that's how it gets its language, by statistically, probabilistically measuring the language in the interest of being concise, which does not happen without high statistical validation of synonyms, including idiomatic and metaphorical use. So that is included, even if it was being used as a metaphor in this translation. Substitution will depend on nuances of context and tone, and it's likely that the ear of the translator would object to failed in a context of God. Listen to this AI. It's saying that whoever translated this, wherever it was, may have had some second thoughts about saying that God failed. So changed it to did not succeed. Now, were those actual words? Was Rashadan, Namo Fag, was Jeff Salu, Ami Fasal? What were those words actually in the? We don't know, but I hope someone will at the research department send us this so we can give it to Mihdi and see what he thinks. But he found it himself by saying these are the words that we back translate that we hope they saw. We hope they didn't make this up. So anyway, he says it requires further even the words did not succeed then require further modification, just as you mentioned in your prompt objection, where you and the other Baha'i editors ears heard failure, which is a valid point as a statistical lexical fact of use. So it wasn't just vain imaginations or something like, why doesn't this sound right, or some kind of ego. It is validated with probabilities within the ML and AI systems. So ignoring by scripture for a moment, I stepped into a mess here by saying this. I said it wrong with the prompt. Anyway, ignoring Baha'i scripture for a moment, and here I'm programming prompts. That doesn't sound, that sounds a little bit. Anyway, ignoring Baha'i scripture for a moment, it's possible that God did not succeed. He says, I'm not programmed to ignore Baha'i scripture, which I should have known. That's a clue right there. But can generally say that, of course, he certainly, yes, did not succeed can be applied to an action by God in the context of human religious, philosophical, or theological discussion. Despite his efforts, God did not succeed in preventing the occurrence of evil in the world. It's common, not generative. Meaning he didn't come up with that, but he's found it in many places that people talk like that. Well, that doesn't mean the Baha'is talk like that. So we had to be very much more specific, and it's impossible for me to ask him not to think like a Baha'i when he's programmed to be a Baha'i. So this suggests that God, in this context only, was unable to achieve a desired outcome of preventing evil. And I said, hey, that's a cop-out. I'm referring to the master's statement. So I contradicted myself right here. I'm not a computer, so I do make lots of mistakes. Not limiting. So now you're pranking us about not limiting the context of human ideas. And he says, no, that's exactly what you asked, which is the truth. It's like, oops. Man, I don't know. I'm not going to edit out the stupid things I did here. Prompt, fair enough. Let me rephrase. Wouldn't a real theological debate, even in itself, modify the phrase in the interest of your own generative balance of critical thinking? Here is what is mind-blowing. He says, yes, you're right. And it's very important to note that the phrase did not succeed when applied to God's action must be used metaphorically or bounded by the frame of theological debate. I would say it shouldn't be used at all, but, but okay, he's qualifying it. It does not, of course, imply a failure or limitation on God's part, as the concept of success or failure itself is not applicable to an all-knowing, all-powerful deity as it is to humans. And in the Baha'i sense, which Mihdi has because he's being programmed with the Baha'i writings, even the master would not pretend to understand God's motives in their essence. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Mihdi came up with. Perhaps this does indicate a translation problem, which you initially suggested. But outside of the faith, systems like process theology severely limit God's power on this plane to persuasion in the name of. This is Whitehead. It's quoting this because I programmed this in. We specifically went to a lot of philosophical references from Wilmette Institute. And he pulling this out, which I know where he got it from, can look inside of his brain. And he's basically saying, and he also has it on Wikipedia, so he looks this up and saying, no, there are people who say that God is limited. And this is kind of, if you read the Baha'u'llah's writings and he keeps saying, please turn to God, please turn to God. You can just say, turn to God, it's over, you're done, you're turned to God, period. God can do whatever he wants. But he doesn't do that because this is a plane of testing, and he wants to see. Baha'u'llah specifically says, God, this is from Mihdi. God says, Valhalla says God could have unified mankind at any moment, but he didn't in order to see who would seek him out and who wouldn't, independently with their own choice. So this whole autonomy choice thing is into this, but I don't think it gives us license to say that God failed. I'm not saying it doesn't give Abdul Baha license. If he really said that, then let's all support it and say, hey, we understand it. Let's go for it. How high, when they say jump, we saw how high on the way down. But this is not Chogyam Effendi's translation, so it'd be really good to see who did translate that, and is that a correct use of the words. Anyway, he says this is a sense of compromise simulated human free will as a touching mechanism in the world, which is exactly what Baha'u'llah said. Prompt: if you were generating a Baha'i translation, would the faith support that concept? Here is the kicker. Midi, no. This is an absolute no. According to the Baha'i writings, God is seen as an all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfect being. The concept of God failing or being unsuccessful is not at all supported in the Baha'i faith. Baha'is believe that God's will and purpose are ultimately fulfilled, even though human understanding may not always comprehend either the reasons or the outcomes. He could be teaching a RUHI class here, and this is an AI computer saying this. The writings emphasize that God's wisdom and knowledge completely surpass human understanding, and that apparent setbacks or challenges in the world are part of a larger divine plan. While individuals may face difficulties or experience setbacks, it is believed that God's ultimate purpose is to guide humanity towards progress and spiritual growth. So no, within the writings of faith, the idea of God can fail or be unsuccessful is not supported concept. Yes, thank you. Okay, so now AI happens to be agreeing with the people whose ears are saying that just didn't sound quite right. So no other writings in your entire database support this translation. It says, unless you stretch human autonomy in Baha'u'llah's sense of manage my mystery and I am his mystery, he's coming up with another one, to mean there is an aspect of choice in being pleased that God allows without releasing his grip on the all-compelling, the all-powerful. So in other words, there's another word for it. It's not that he did not have the will to do it. He willed it and it didn't happen. It's that he was unwilling to be that coercive. So that's another very subtle thing he came up with. Prompt: given that you don't have access yet to the Persian or Arabic, please, if someone's listening to this, send us the Persian or Arabic of that, please. We have a link to it. You see the quote, but it's on Baha'i.org, other tablets, and then you put in the keyboard, you'll find it. How would you modify the statement given? Okay, I've asked him to rewrite it. I could substitute, it seems God was unwilling to force humans to be pleased. That sounds a little contrived and forced, but it gets the idea around that God, it wasn't that God couldn't, but that he did it as a test. It prefers any Arabic or Parsi etymology by softening. Oh, so he's preserving the actual Farsi as if it actually said that. He's sort of being an apologist for the master, which you don't have to be, but thank you, Midi. The etymology of that was weakening of the will by softening, didn't possess the strength of will or was unwilling, which keeps the wills almighty but allows for human choice. That's what he's doing by recreating this. Isn't that subtle? It's amazing and nuanced how he's saying God was unwilling. It's not that he couldn't. It's that he didn't do it, but use that etymology as if that was the actual Persian word. That is so cool. Of course, this could be more in the tone of the master if I could deeply analyze the actual tablets. Okay, that's what I got ahead of myself. He did say that he couldn't much more take on the tone of the master if he had the original words. So this is a tablet, not a prayer, or more of a combination. It's both a tablet and a prayer. The master might also have been using humor, metaphor. This is what amazed me, or tongue-in-cheek, and not a little meaning, which context could modify, as when Baha'u'llah humorously said humans should chase material gain in the womb, as this is the world they were approaching. That's just a source finding about humor, Baha'u'llah's humor, and the master's humors, which we scraped because we wanted to have a little bit of lightness in this, but it used it, seeing that, yes, the master might have been over-exaggerating a statement that, hey, you didn't hear his tone, and you didn't see the context, and you can't see the Persian, and it is 100 times more nuanced language than English is, as the Guardian said. So you could actually hear this in Persian. He might have had a smile on his face when he wrote that and said, hey, God couldn't do it, how could we do it? It could have been lighthearted. It doesn't have to be some big, what do you mean, God can't do anything? So, and I didn't think of that. That came up. Our AI actually told us that. Is that astonishing or not? I think it's pretty cool. So, and it's not even done yet. It's still doing a lot of scraping. All right, we've looked at everything we need to look at today. We're going too long. You can, if you look at this link or any of the links that we're putting in the description, and you are, please, if you are an ML or AI person, email me. My email, I can't put it on YouTube, but it's all over this site. So click it, email us, and help us with Wikimedia, start writing your articles, or discuss the technology with us. This is the blocking and tackling, the everyday stuff that we're doing to make this happen with our priorities and to get to this, all of these different aspects of modules of the model itself of MIDI, which is, this was the coding one. We just showed you that it's actually starting to code already. It can do a lot more code. Obviously, machine learning is creating its own algorithms. So if you have trouble coding it and you want it to learn it, let it do it itself. That's what it just coded fantastically. And we have tried them on Wikimedia and it works. Its code is flawless. It also was able to take boxes off of other Baha'i articles. Now we're parsing that manually because we don't want to spam and have it jump in with its IP address and have Wikimedia, all the rest of our editors go, wait, somebody's spamming us with a bot. But when it does it, you can manually go on and add the references that it coded for you and take a box off. We had a very important box. I won't mention it because you see the Baha'i editor or admin, and I don't want you to do that, but there was an article that was very important to the faith on the main line about the faith that had a box on it saying there were too many internal references. MIDI fixed it because we have all those. Now, you could have done that. You could spend days and days looking it up, which we've done. All of us admins and editors have done that on Wiki and spent a lot of personal time. But this is just saving us a lot of time and effort and quality by having access, not looking it up on the web, but asking it specifically. It's like a supercharged search engine because it doesn't just search, it also generates. So again, check out the description for these links. This is some of the breaking news about helping with wikis, having a fantastic, this is we're calling the C-Web. It's got C-Web, cweb.pro I think it's going to be on, where you can actually use this as you want, if you're a translator or if you're just trying to understand and you want to see Shogafendi's etymologies and the word to use, RUHI Economist said this is the one you need. You're going to be able to have it. You don't have to pay, what are they, $500 to get a physical 1,000-page copy of it and then dig through it. This is a joke where it says the Guardian never used DORD. DORD for lectures, like lexicographers, if I can say the word, us dictionary types, those word types, is a non-existent word that accidentally slipped into this edition back in 1934 and made it famous. The other thing that made it famous is the Baha'i writings and RUHI Economist in the House of Justice saying, this is your source. This is the book you want to use for etymology and for meanings according to the way that the Guardian found them. So the closer we want to get to the Guardian's voice, the more we should use his original. And the case histories of all his other writings. The training sets from all of the Guardian's wonderful, wonderful writings, long sentences and all, as RUHI Economist said. You know, all of them, Advent of Divine Justice, all of them training our friend Midi here to be able to apply them as we go forward. And I know I get a lot of questions, you know, is the house going to be involved in the translation, all that? How's the only that does translation? You have some rogue people out there doing their own translation. That's not the purpose of this. Nor are we going to make it available to people saying, oh, I want to become a new translator outside the house. We're working closely with the NSA and with the house, our local NSA of Germany in case of distribution channel, which is located in Germany. But yeah, to whatever extent we want it, if we do not want to use it on the administrative side, we can certainly post things that will help you augment the ideas that you find on Wikipedia, social media, and other places with a really great source of references. If you're a scholar and you're doing publications, if you're involved with Wilmette Institute or other institutes for, or even just teaching RUHI classes, this will be a wonderful, wonderful help to you, to junior youth. Junior youth is totally into technology. I know the framework in 13.2 kind of down talks technology, but if you want to get after junior youth with all their scrolling, you know, then yeah, here's something that'll really excite them if they can help contribute to writing these articles. It also helps teach them languages, you know, and There's going to be a course around this that we're giving that's targeted towards junior youth on how to do these projects. There'll probably be a dozen courses by the end of the year on this site that relate to using MIDI. And that's just getting you out there to help you with what you need in your scholarship or your public discourse, or even if you're asked to give a talk. He's here to help you with the right diacriticals, whoops, sorry, don't show you that, and the correct references. Thanks again for watching. I greatly appreciate your time, and check out the links in the descriptions. See you next video.